First, we'd like to have a moment of silence for Ricky DiCillo. Sylvia, would you like to update us on Ricky?
We've all, been doing these hybrid meetings for quite a while, and we're so lucky that we have so many people that are able to come in person and also virtually, all our friends from DOT, from New Hampshire DES, and Ricky was a faithful follower of our MPO and our commission. And we heard recently that he had passed. And so at the TAC meeting, we had a moment of silence. And we did ask that that we do the same here today.
So please let us have a moment of silence for Ricky DiCillo. Thank you. We'll do what we normally do. We'll do a action on the minutes and also roll call. Could I have a motion to accept the minutes from September 26th, please? Moved. Is there a second? Any corrections or omissions from here or outside calling in? Okay, Sylvia, do you want to move forward, please, with that?
Yes, all right. I don't believe we have Paula in today, so we'll move right to Bedford. In-house, we have Bill Jean.
Present, yes.
Online from Bedford, we have Dan. Dan? Can the virtual audience hear us?
We can hear you, but it's very broken today.
Yeah, that's kind of strange. I can sort of hear my own feedback. That might be internet and there's nothing I can do about it, so I apologize.
I can hear. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Brian.
Yeah, as far as my connection, I hear you guys crystal clear. Everyone.
Okay, thank you.
All right, this is Dan Heath. I've responded several times. Can you hear me yet?
Yes, we can hear you now, Dan.
Very good.
And your vote was?
Yes.
Thank you, Dan. Let's move to Brian Lord.
Present, yes, I can hear you great, thanks.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, those virtual, if you're not speaking, if you could mute yourself, sometimes that helps as well. From Chester in-house, we have Andrew Haddock.
Here and yes.
And online, we have Deb Munson.
Here and yes.
Thank you, Deb. From Deerfield in-house, we have Fred McGarry.
Here and abstain.
Okay, great. And from Derry in-house, we have Jeff Moulton.
Here and yes.
John O'Connor.
Present, abstain.
And Richard Tripp.
Here and yes.
From Francistown in-house, we have Linda Kuhnhart.
Here and yes.
And Gary Schneckenberg.
Here and yes.
And online, we have Jennifer Vadney.
Here and abstain.
Okay, great. Thank you. From Hooksett in-house, we have Denise Pitchett-Volk. Oh, but she did step out, but I swear she is here. And we were happy to see that for Hooksett. From Londonderry in-house, we have Deb Levins.
Here and abstain.
Thank you. And Art Rugg.
I am here and yes on the minutes.
And online, we have Brian Battaglia.
Here and abstain.
Wonderful. From Manchester in-house, we have Peter Capano.
Yeah, present and abstain.
Ray Clement.
Here and abstain.
Dan O'Neill.
Here and abstain.
And online, we have Marcus Ponce de Leon.
Here and yes.
Thank you. We're missing folks from New Boston and Ware, but from Wyndham in-house, we have Peter Griffin and Ed LaPointe.
Here and yes.
Here and yes.
Thank you. And wasn't that wild of me just now? And MPO, we have, other voting members. We have from New Hampshire DOT, William Rose.
Good morning, present and yes.
Thank you. And I believe, and then from our voting MPO members, we have Vanessa Partington. and we have Jessica Wilcox. So thanks for joining us.
Good morning and thank you.
And also just of note, we have the new town planner in Londonderry, Ben Bennett. So good to have you all here.
Thank you.
Welcome, Ben.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed, welcome.
Okay,
Great to be here.
Sylvia, do we have any old business?
I believe not. Thank you.
Okay. And first item on the agenda under new business, Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission fiscal year 2023 to 2026, TIP amendment number 3, and Nate will be speaking about that.
I will. If I can figure out how to share my screen, I've only done this a few times. I think I've got it pretty much down to a science now. Okay. Going to hide my floating meeting controls, and now we're good. Can everybody see this online in full screen mode?
Yes,
Looks
perfect.
good.
Great. So I'm going to give you all a sneak peek this morning of TIP amendment number 3. We haven't released TIP amendment number 3 yet. I'll give you an idea of the schedule in a moment, but you're getting a sneak peek today of all of the changes that will be in TIP amendment number 3. I showed this slide every time because it is confusing when we talk about the 10-year plan versus the transportation improvement program versus the metropolitan plan. Today, we are talking about the TIP being TIP, our transportation improvement program. That is a 4-year federally required program. These are generally speaking, if a project is in the TIP, it is the closest to construction. Things are happening on the project. If it's not under construction, there's engineering and right-of-way work happening to lead towards construction in the short term. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, are projects that are programmed for the next 1 to 4 years in our TIP. So we work cooperatively with our colleagues at New Hampshire DOT as well as the other MPOs to process TIP amendments in a coordinated way. New Hampshire DOT has requested a TIP amendment number 3. There are some project additions, project removals, timing adjustments, and funding adjustments. I'll walk through those over the next few minutes. Schedule-wise, we do anticipate releasing TIP amendment number 3 on Monday, November 6th. We'll hold a 10-day public comment period, which will conclude on Friday, November 17th. You will have TIP amendment number 3, the document, in your packet for the next MPO meeting, which is November 28th. And at that November 28th meeting, we will hold the public hearing to consider adoption. So what are the projects? And I'll go through these in alphabetical order. The first is a local bridge project in Auburn. It's Griffin Mill Road over Maple Falls Brook. This project is being removed from the TIP. It's not being removed from the TIP because the project is going away. It's being removed from the TIP because the project is now scheduled to go to construction in fiscal year 2027. So we're talking about 23 to 26, that 4-year period. Anything that happens beyond 26 is not included in the TIP. So we will see this in the next TIP. So the project isn't going away. We'll see it in the future, just not right now. Bedford 40664. This is the widening of Route 3 from Hawthorne Drive north to the Manchester Airport Access Road. This is removing fiscal 26 construction phase funding. That's because the current schedule has this project going to construction now in fiscal 27. Things are happening with this project. There is engineering happening right now. Nothing is changing to the engineering and right-of-way funding programmed in the TIP for the project. That's all staying the same. It's just that the first year of construction is now anticipated to be 1 year later. Bedford Merrimack 16100. This is the conversion of the toll plaza in Bedford to all electronic tolling. And it's a project that's been in the works for a number of years now. It was supposed to go to construction originally during fiscal year 23. That is now being delayed. It will go to construction starting in fiscal year 24 now and continuing until fiscal year 26. There's also some final engineering phase funding going into the tip for fiscal 24. So a 1-year delay on that project. But it is coming soon. Derry Londonderry, the C project, whenever you see Derry Londonderry, that generally means it's a component of the exit 4A reconstruction. This is one of the breakout projects of the exit 4A, the larger exit 4A project. This C project is Shenandoah Road construction all the way to the 102 intersection. There is a reduction in construction funding in the tip, both in fiscal 25 and 26. That's not because there's some cost savings on the project or anything like that. That actually, this portion of the project is now anticipated to extend into fiscal 27 for construction. So there's portions of the fiscal 25 and 26 funding are being redeployed to fiscal 27 for that reason. It's still going to start on the same schedule. It's just the completion of that phase of the project is now anticipated to extend into fiscal 27. Goffstown, this is a local bridge project on Center Street over Harry Brook. We are adding this project to the tip, and that is because federal funding is being programmed for construction phase work for this project. And any project that includes federal funding must be included in the tip. We don't include the state aid bridge projects typically because those are state funded. They don't need to be included in the tip because there's not a federalization of the project. This particular local bridge project will have federal funding associated, so we're carrying it in the tip for that reason. Hooksett 29611. This is the reconstruction and widening of Route 3 from Route 27 to Alice Avenue. Just like the Bedford project, the first year of construction is now anticipated to move from 26 to 27. But PE and right-of-way work is still happening. The engineering and right-of-way phase work is still happening. There's no change to those elements of the work. In fact, if you want to see the PE phase work in firsthand, you can go tonight at 6 p.m. to the Hooksett Town Council chambers. DOT is holding a public informational meeting to review engineering concepts for this project. So things are moving forward here. It's just that the first year of construction is now anticipated to occur beyond the tip horizon. Manchester 16099. This is the engineering and right-of-way work for I-293 exit 6 and 7. We know from the draft 10-year plan that I-293 exit 6 and 7, both of those components are being delayed to 2032 and 2034 respectively. We talked a little bit about that at a recent meeting. Some of the challenges related to toll revenue models in the context of inflation and also in the context of the traffic patterns post-pandemic not quite bouncing back to what was originally anticipated. Those dynamics have spelled delays on the turnpike system, and exit 6 and 7 are unfortunately being delayed construction wise. However, this tip amendment does have engineering phase work being added in fiscal 25 and 26. So even though the construction is being delayed, the project development process continues. Engineering phase work anticipated to continue in 25 and 26, preparing for that project. Nashua Merrimack Bedford 13761. This, anytime you see Nashua Merrimack Bedford, that is a component of the F.E. Everett Turnpike widening. The northern portion of that is happening right now around the town of Bedford. I'm sure you've all driven through it a few times recently. This is a component of that work, largely the engineering component, and right-of-way component. So engineering work being added in fiscal 24 to 26 and right-of-way work being added in fiscal 24 to 26. That is also likely tying into a delay in that project. So in the 10-year plan, the completion of that F.E. Everett Turnpike project is extending 3 years. There's one of the components of the project in Merrimack is now anticipated to be completed in 2031 instead of 2028. That pushes the extension, the completion timeline for the project, and likely as a result, we're seeing some backfilling of engineering and right-of-way funds for a 3-year period, kind of corresponding with that. There is a standalone project in the TIP right now. It's called NEVI Program Charging 44093. This is the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program funds. DOT, essentially, this is going to be removed as a standalone project, and all of the NEVI funds will be incorporated into this new program on the next slide called EV Infra. So instead of having a standalone numbered project for all of the NEVI funding, DOT is going to administer the NEVI funds as they do most other statewide programs, as a program with a series of child projects under it. The NEVI program, if you're not familiar with that, has put out a request for proposals for locations and development. You can find it on the DOT's website, likely on the front page right now. It's a fairly high profile RFP. So they are going out with a large portion of the NEVI funds to begin building out that EV infrastructure. There is a program called FLAP in our TIP. It is Federal Lands Access Program, FLAP. We carry this program in our TIP because it is a statewide program that could theoretically benefit the Southern New Hampshire region. There's particularly the dam, and the Everett Dam and Ware is a federal lands access project, the roads that go to that. But there are no current projects in the TIP or in the program that will directly benefit the SNHPC region, but there could be in the future. So this is adding engineering, construction, and other phase funding in fiscal 24. That's to reflect the program of projects that does exist in the FLAP program, some of which are in Nashua and most of which are in the North Country, up in the White Mountain National Forest area. The other phase funding, if you're curious what that means, there's $200,000 for a road safety audit on Route 12A at the near the entrance to the St. Gaudens National Historic Park in Cornish. And I put that on here because if you've never been to Route 12A in the vicinity of the St. Gaudens National Historic Park in Cornish, please go visit sometime. It is one of the prettiest places in New Hampshire. It's definitely worth going to check out. The FTA 5307 program, this is Boston urbanized area funding for New Hampshire DOT programmed projects. This is Federal Transit Administration funding. This is a reduction, on paper, reduction of fiscal 23 to 26 funding. It's not necessarily that funding is reduced per se. It's that FTA has issued guidance, essentially that the American Rescue Plan funds have already been obligated and shouldn't be incorporated into the TIP, into the dollar figures of that program. So DOT is taking out a lot of those COVID-related rescue plan funds. And so what you'll see is on paper, it's a reduction, but really those COVID funds still exist. They've just already been obligated. The FTA 5310 program, which is the program that supports transportation services around the state for people who are elderly and have disabilities, is seeing an increase in fiscal 23 to 26 program funding based on anticipated revenues and funding obligations. We use that funding source throughout our region for a number of things: the Derry Londonderry shuttle that CART provides, the Goffstown shuttle that MTA provides, the New Boston shuttle that MTA provides, the Hooksett shuttle that MTA provides. All are derived from this 5310 program. 5339 FTA is a capital program for bus and bus facilities. This does bus terminals, bus stops, capital rolling stock replacements for transit providers. This is also going to see an increase in fiscal 24 to 26 funding based on anticipated FTA revenues and funding obligations around the state. We're getting kind of deep in the weeds here with some of this. There is a program that is listed as a transfer from Surface Transportation Block Grant to Federal Transit Administration that went into effect a couple of years ago. It supports a number of different transit initiatives around the state, including supplemental operating funds to our 5307 providers, including Manchester Transit Authority. This is seeing kind of an adjustment between the federal and non-federal share. It's not really a funding change per se. I think the intent is to be more accurate with what the non-federal share is. behind the scenes, that funding transfer funds some things that require a 50% match. It funds some things that require a 20% match. It funds some other things that are matched by turnpike toll credits, like the mobility manager around the state. So there's kind of a blended non-federal match rate component, and this is just adjusting those to be more accurate. The Transportation Alternatives Program is seeing, on paper, you'll see increases of PE right-of-way and construction phase funding. This is really carryover funding that's being programmed. That funding is necessary to complete the projects in the TAP program. So it will look like a significant increase on paper, but really that's being driven by simply programming carryover funds available to the department in that program. There's a new program being established called TRAFMON. It's a statewide traffic monitoring program. This is intended to encompass all of the state's traffic counting activities. So the loop detectors that you see on the interstate and interstate ramps, the piezoelectric sensors, the WIM, the weigh in motion, what we call WIM machines that weigh trucks and cars at highway speeds, the calibration of those devices, all of that will be encompassed in a new statewide program. Programmed at $2 million per year for statewide traffic monitoring. There is a new project called a 4R project. This is 4R is a technical term that means resurfacing, restoration, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. Historically, you would hear of 4R projects on the interstate system. This particular new statewide 4R project is intended to be used anywhere on the national highway system in the state. The national highway system has a different definition than the interstate system. It includes all of the interstates, but it actually includes some of the, like Route 101, for instance, in our region, Route 3, some of the major principal arterial roads. So this is a new statewide project that will do rehabilitation and reconstruction on national highway system roads. There's a local bridge project in Ware, 14338. This is a very old project number. This project's been around for a long time. It's evolved and changed over time. It is now the replacement of the River Road Bridge over the Piscataquag River in Ware. It is moving forward and is now anticipated to go to construction in fiscal 25 and 26. There's now federal funding associated with that, as we talked about with the Goffstown project before. So because there's federal funding associated with it, we need to ensure that it's incorporated into our TIP. Windham 40663 is the corridor engineering study of Route 111 in Windham. This is not a new project. We're adding it to the TIP, but it's a project that's been around for a while. You may remember it from previous 10-year plans. It was delayed. It is now it's been brought back to life and is now underway. And so we need to make sure that that's incorporated into our TIP. The project recently started, is expected to be complete in fiscal year 2025. And that was a lot of dry content for you. You all did very well. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any, but
is everyone awake? No.
Yeah.
Any questions for Nate in-house?
Where was the picture taken from that you showed for your opening screen?
I believe, let's see. Uncanunic, looking at Manchester.
Yeah.
Any questions for Nate from those calling in? Oh, I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
Nate, on the new electric vehicle infrastructure program, is that going to include the Volkswagen money too?
I think the Volkswagen money is separate. That's non-federal funding administered generally by New Hampshire DES. I think this EV infrastructure funding will likely encompass just the federal NEVI funds.
Okay.
No coordination.
Well, there is coordination happening between the two state agencies, but this particular program, I suspect, is going to encompass the NEVI funds.
Jacob, I think you have a question.
No question, Peter, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Yeah, Munson, do you have a question? I'm seeing a hand up icon. I guess not.
Maybe it was just the mouse.
Oh,
Yeah, no, that's the mouse appears to look like a hand.
push me over the edge, Nate. Any other questions from anyone? Okay, Nate, thank you very much. Next item, equity analysis, regional transportation investment, Suzanne and Nina Barr and Zachary Swick will be. Knee neighbor, my apologies.
It's okay,
It's a scary looking name. It's a
Sorry.
knee that lives next door.
I'm so sorry, just to make note that also we have so Jacob LaFontaine from Goffstown and Don Waldron from Manchester are virtual participants.
So I'm gonna share the screen. Pull up the PowerPoint, put that in full screen mode. Okay.
How do we look, Tammy?
I'm still seeing the PowerPoint software.
Really?
Mhm.
Oh, so let me try to so nothing moved forward for you.
No.
Okay.
Try it again.
Yep, we'll try it again. I thought I did it in the same order as Nate.
You did.
So I'm gonna go
That
to Zoom.
doesn't mean anything.
Doesn't mean it. It works. Okay, I'm gonna share our screen. Oh, maybe if I share the slideshow?
I'd share the slideshow.
Yeah, let's try this. How about now, Tammy?
Now I see it.
Perfect. Okay, excellent. All right, thank you all. So today, Zach and I are going to talk a little bit about some work we've been doing on a transportation equity analysis. This topic might sound very familiar to you because Zach presented on it probably last summer.
September. Yeah.
Just about a year ago, 2022. And it's because this is an evolving piece of work and we wanted to kind of just have a check-in with you. This particular piece of work focuses on understanding the distribution of transportation investments across the region from an equity standpoint. Okay, so as soon as I figure out how to advance it, there we go. We're going to cover four main things. We'll talk about why analyzing transportation equity is important. I will do a very high level review of the work that Zach and other folks did in 2022. And then he'll really dig into the meat of the presentation on our latest findings around transportation investments. And we'll just sum up some key takeaways and next steps. So what is transportation equity? Why do we care about it? I provided here the definition from Federal Highway Administration that this is really about addressing fairness and mobility and accessibility to meet the needs of all community members. There's a variety of components we can look at in terms of affordability, reliability, access to social and economic opportunity. And I think it's really important to remember that this is about being responsive to unique community needs. It's not about giving every community, every neighborhood the exact same investment. It's about tailoring appropriately to the needs. And this is a nice graphic from City of Fort Collins in Colorado. You know, up here you see at the top, you see people all getting the same bike, but not everyone can use it. The bottom, you see people getting investments or bikes that are tailored to their abilities. I want to make it clear that there is no boilerplate for this. There's no plug and play. When you Google this on the internet, you see everybody really trying to figure out how to do an equity analysis, but there's no gold standard. So what we're doing is pulling from available resources and then tailoring it to our own needs. A couple of key things we looked at. The Transportation Research Board and National Academies published a guide. Here's a recommendation on some steps to undertaking an equity analysis. I also looked at probably the most comprehensive equity analysis I could find, which is from the Bay Area. Very, very heavily funded, very big geography to look at, but it's a good resource for being able to chunk out like a discrete task that we think we can manage here at SNHPC. This is an ongoing process. We know the data will evolve over time. Our research questions will continue to evolve. So probably expect to have other check-ins like this in the coming years. And the other reason why we do this is that proactive analysis of equity considerations really helps us adhere to our federal funding requirements. We need to comply with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act and various other executive orders that bar discrimination based upon a number of different things. So by being proactive about this, we're hoping to stay ahead of the game and be very intentional about making sure that transportation planning processes and outcomes are addressing equity in our region. Let's take a look at what you heard about a year ago. There was a fantastic report that Zach and other folks on the team worked on, really doing three really important things. analyzing key populations, understanding the demographics and distribution of various populations in our region, defining the region's equity area, and then also identifying some key needs and concerns around that equity area. And this report is available for download on the SNHPC website. In terms of analyzing key populations, the resource that we used was census data. And we examined things on a census tract level. And for each census tract, we wanted to understand, well, what is the population of different groups? We looked at federally protected classes, and these are groups that under federal law, we need to make sure that our work does not create any sense of discrimination for people who are racial and ethnic minorities, for people who are living below the poverty line, and for people with English proficiency. We also, because we had so much census data at our fingertips, wanted to examine the needs of other vulnerable groups that may be particularly impacted by transportation investments or lack thereof. So that includes seniors, people 65 and older, folks with a disability, and that can be physical, mental, cognitive, whatever. And then also people who say they live in households without a vehicle, no vehicle households, that they don't have access to a car for their daily needs. We also then wanted to take that understanding of the demographic analysis of each census tract and start to score each census tract to understand that kind of level of vulnerability that each census tract was dealing with. So this is the scoring rubric. Basically, we wanted to track any census tract scoring 1 standard deviation or higher above our regional average, the mean for a particular category. And for those in federally protected classes, they got 2 points. And for census tracts where they weren't federally protected classes, but they were one of our vulnerable groups, we scored 1 point. And for those of you who, like me, haven't really thought about math in about 25 years, I think it's helpful to find, look for the cute chart online with a little graphic animated image or something. It will help you understand it. When we talk about standard deviation, we're talking about a statistically significant variation from the mean. So this is the threshold that a census tract would need to score in for a particular group to get any points at all. And if we just look at one example, if you look at our region at folks with limited English proficiency, the mean for any census tract is across the region is 5%. In order for a tract to score, they needed to get at least 12% of their population with limited English proficiency. And I was very surprised to see there's a very high scoring tract in our region with 43% of the population having limited English proficiency. So you can kind of see what it takes to score a point in this rubric. Now, if we look at the region as a whole, we had about 24 census tracts score. Most of them were in Manchester. We also had tracts in Londonderry, Bedford, and Goffstown. Each received 1 point for their higher senior populations. Once we set a threshold saying, okay, you need at least 4 points to kind of meet the threshold for being in our equity area, that's where we were able to define, this is the geographic equity area. It's all contiguous in central Manchester. It didn't have to be contiguous, it just happened to be. And this gives us a lot of important information for understanding, well, this is a geography where we need to be paying careful attention to our transportation planning work to make sure we're addressing the equity concerns of folks living in this area. It also becomes the foundation, based upon national academies and best practices that we're aware of, becomes the foundation for all of our future equity analysis work that Zach is now going to describe. So this is just kind of the baseline, bringing us up to speed with the analysis that's just happened. Oh, no, I have a couple more things, sorry, forgot. Couple more things I wanted to highlight. There are particular needs and concerns that phase 1 report started to address. For example, we saw that the equity area experiences a much higher level of vehicle miles traveled per square mile. It kind of makes sense because there's higher density in Manchester than other parts of the region. However, let's also keep in mind that people are probably about 4 times less likely to own a car. They're more likely to live in a no vehicle household. So you have people dealing with the impacts and repercussions of a lot of car use, whether it's air quality, noise, here's an example chart up here, or that sort of thing, but they're less likely to actually own a car and may have mobility concerns themselves. Another thing to keep in mind is that the challenges faced by the equity area in other parts of the region may be different. And if you look at these safety related charts, we see that outside of the equity area in the rest of the region, there's safety concerns around motorized crashes. Inside the equity area, we're really concerned about fatal bike and pedestrian crashes and really needing to make sure that transportation infrastructure investments are in prioritizing safety for people who are walking and biking. And with that, now I'll pass it over to Zach.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
Jump away.
Yeah.
On the maps you were showing me, you talk about the regional mean. Is that for our RPC region? The maps seem to include areas that were not,
So-
because it's by census tract.
It's by
Okay.
census, no, it is the regional, it is the regional rate for these census tracts. Because Francistown shares a census tract with Deering and Bennington.
Yeah.
So,
So part of that is captured in this
yes,
analysis.
but it's a very small population, so it doesn't change things.
Not important.
Right.
I wouldn't call them not important, but you said, yeah.
Robin, you had a question?
I have a question. Can you go back to that last slide that you had with the vehicle? Okay.
Yeah.
So my question is, how did you measure that? Just because it's sort of a fascinating chart, actually.
So,
And then my second question is it looks like this data was in 22.
so this is from this, so this is all comes from NHDES FARS data, which we have the actual, for the fatal crashes, we have the actual location.
Okay,
Where
so
the-
how did you get,
So this is from 2021 to 2022, 2011 to
It's a
2021.
10-year period, yeah,
11 year, 10 years back, yeah.
okay,
10 years.
all right. So when you said that was it the work was done in 2022 or the data was collected? I mean, not maybe
This
in
is
general.
this is an updated chart, I'm sorry, this is updated from, this was not actually in the original.
It was, I pulled it.
No, but no,
You updated it.
I
Okay.
updated, so this has been updated since that report came out. Was when we did that in 2022.
Okay. I guess my question is, because at the beginning you talked about 2022, and when you're looking at data in 2022, wasn't that the middle of COVID?
Some of that, but
So
most of the, but
Most of it was over by then.
most of it, and a lot of the data we were looking at was, actually, 5 to 10 years
Okay.
older.
Right, because it's census data, which
Yeah.
is,
Oh, it's over.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
okay, now Zach, take it away.
Okay, so we wanted to come up with a way to look at what projects were getting spent where, and for that, we chose to use our metropolitan transportation plan project, which is, if you ever pick it up from our 2021 document, it's a list of about 139 projects that are, it was spent throughout the region. And that includes lots of stuff like Nate was talking about, like the TIP, and then the 10-year plan, and then the out years, which are those that are outside of the 10-year plan. And it represents in 2021 dollars over $1 billion worth of investment between 2021 and 2045. So we're talking about real money. We then looked at the projects and tried to come up with natural classes for them. So the first was the project type, and for that we broke it up in bicycle and pedestrian, debt service, highway, bridge, which we then split up again into limited access expressway and non-limited access expressways. Because remember, when we say highway here, we're speaking DOT talk, which means just roadways. So breaking it up into interstate and highways, that sort of thing, and then expressway and just regular roads. Then we had study, which would be like a corridor study, something like that. And then transit, which is both operating funds and capital funds. Then we broke it up again into two other categories. So we said, okay, the MPO holds a lot of projects in its MTP that it has zero control over. We hold, the exit 6, 7 projects in Manchester. We have no say over that. That is a state project. We can advise, we can make recommendations, but we really don't have any say over it. The same for some transit. Some transit money we have control over, others is just passed through to MTA. So we wanted to break those out into two categories. We'd say, okay, which are all of our projects and the ones that we actually really have control over. Then all the different projects were conceptualized as 3 different geographic shapes, points. So that would be like a bus stop. Lines would be obviously, a road, a corridor, that sort of thing. And then polygons would be for, things like a transit service serving, a number of different towns. So that's how they were conceptualized. And then, the dollars were then allocated to that based on, per mile, per square foot, that sort of thing. So there are some major caveats and limitations that we have to address before we go any further. One is that for these projects, the costs are distributed equally across the entire project. That doesn't happen in real life. If you have a road project and part of that road project has a bridge, the part with the bridge is going to be much more expensive than the rest of the project. But we don't know that fine grain of detail for these projects. A lot of them, the ones that are set out for 2045, they don't have any kind of breakdown like that. Second, transportation projects affect people in areas not immediately near them. If I commute to Boston and they build a new highway, which is 10 minutes from me, but it makes my commute faster, that benefits me, but it's not, its proximity to me is not immediate. Three, the MTP is a snapshot in time. As we saw today with Nate talking, things change. Sometimes they change, even within the same year. That's why we have TIP amendments. And so we need to keep that in mind, that this is just representing the projects as they were in the winter of 2020, 2021. And lastly, we are only talking about total dollars invested here. We're not talking about whether it's a wise, needed, best use, or adequate investment. We're just talking about dollars spent. Benefits and harms are not considered. That's going to be a future step because it's much harder to figure out even how conceptually, theoretically to do that. So at this point, we're kicking the can down for future me, to try to figure out. Okay, when we get to the projects, on the left are all the MTP projects in blue. On the right are the ones that we control in green. So you can see for all projects, it's a little over $1 billion. And you can see that there are big differences in the ones we control. So all the bike and pedestrians coming through us, the debt service in this particular case is for 93, widening of 93. And that's something we don't have any control over. Highway and bridge, again, it's much lower because we don't have any limited access expressways. We don't have any say over the interstate. And also transit is less for our that we have control over, again, because a lot of it's passed through dollars. A couple things to highlight here. Debt service makes up 20% of the MPV's total funding. So a fifth of our total funding is going to serving the debt. Limited access expressway projects make up 56% of the MPP funding, and this does not include the vast majority of I-93's expansion. Most of that would have been in a previous MTP. More than 3/4 of the funding is going to limited access expressways or paying down the debt on those projects. So how do we want to think about conceptualizing that distribution throughout the region? We could do just, pure dollars, where do they go? Well, the area outside the equity area is a much larger area, so it's going to have a lot more dollars. So that doesn't really make sense. We could do it per square mile, but again, the equity area is much smaller and has a bunch of transportation stuff in it, so it's going to be much higher. So we decided instead to look at per capita. What is the spending per capita? And that's the final numbers that you can see there. On the left is the equity area, and the rest of the region is on the right. And those numbers, while the rest of the region is a little bit higher, with the brush that I'm painting here, that's basically equal or approximate, because based on all the margin of error in the analysis. Here we have the spending per capita. Blue, again, all the projects in the MTP. Green are all the ones that we have control over. And if you look at for the ones that we have control over, again, it's fairly close. They're both getting about $1,000 per capita. Bike is much higher within the region. Much higher within the equity area. Debt service again is much lower because 93 isn't in the equity area, or that section of it is not. Highway and bridge is higher outside the equity area. And then transit is higher within the equity area, which you would want to expect considering we're talking about downtown Manchester. This is exactly the same thing, but just showing it in graph form. On the left are all the projects. On the right are the projects we have control of. And again, you can see that if you look on the right, bike ped is much higher, highway and bridge is much lower, transit's higher, that sort of thing. One thing we do want to highlight is we also looked at it in terms of two separate time periods, one being the 10-year plan and then being the out years, because one, the 10-year plan has actual dollars allocated for it. They've been programmed, whereas the out years do not. And also it's just more immediate in the sense that it's not, 30 years away. So if we look at the total MTP control for the region, if we look at the MPO controls for the MTP, they're very similar, but if we look at just a 10-year plan, it's about half for the equity area per capita. So the equity area is getting about half for the 10-year plan. Does that mean something? Is that just a one-time fluke? We're gonna have to keep, looking at this going on. So the nenext time we update the MTP, I'm gonna run this analysis again and see if we're still seeing that kind of disparity or if it was just a one-time thing. We're back to you.
Yeah, and I just wanted to, first of all, thank you, Zach, for doing amazing work on crunching all the numbers. So this is really Zach's baby, and I'm just helping to explain it and put some icing on it. But I wanted to sum up some key takeaways and next steps. What we learned from Zach's presentation is that, we have currently in the current MTP a relatively equal distribution of transportation investments between the equity area and the rest of the region. That doesn't mean that we're doing everything right, but it means we're starting from a good baseline for continuing to monitor and hopefully make improvements in addressing equity issues. Like Zach touched upon, there are very important variations in investments based on project categories. We're likely to continue to see higher levels of bike and ped investment in the equity area compared to the rest of the region, and that's a good thing, especially if you're talking about populations that have more mobility challenges and can't or don't drive. Like Zach mentioned, this is a snapshot in time. So we don't have a sense of trend. We can't make any definitive statement, but now we have a really good foundation for continuing to self-monitor and see, in the next 10-year plan, are we actually helping projects in the equity area move from concept towards completion? Like, are they actually making that journey? So it's giving us something to start to kind of monitor our successes. And then finally, Zach mentioned that we haven't touched upon any particular harms or benefits around a given project. A highway project that, that's expanding lanes and touching in the equity area might primarily be benefiting folks who live outside the region. So we need to do more work to dig deeper. That's for our future selves. We'll figure it out, in the coming couple of years. Like, how do we start to scope that analysis of understanding harms and benefits? How do we get folks, we would definitely want to have community engagement around these issues and understand what people feel is most impactful to them. And then that also gives us a baseline for starting to have conversations about how to mitigate potential harms where they do occur. So lots more work to do. We will continue to have these conversations, and we just wanted to do a check-in and hopefully kind of get any feedback and questions from you. This report is not yet on our website, but we're making some finishing copy edits, and we'll get it up as soon as we can.
Questions for Suzanne or Zach? Please go right ahead.
That number that you're looking at for how we're servicing people is fairly even. It's a good start. Do we know how far behind we are? I mean, how much catch up are you going to have to do to have really good services for those?
We don't.
Yeah.
We don't. And
can you get that if you keep in down the line? Can you get that?
Basically look at a trend and how we're spending, but the short answer is we'd have to go back and look at decades of infrastructure planning and projects and all that sort of thing. And that it would be like if you want to pay for me to go to grad school, that'd be a wonderful dissertation. But short of that, I don't know if we're going to be able to make that kind of assessment.
Any additional questions for those of you in-house?
So can you teach me how to think like that so you can take data and turn it into something that you can see and understand?
No, because then you'll take my job. I'll be out of work.
Any
I should
questions for those of you calling in? I guess that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
I don't
you.
know if it'd be wonderful.
It might be painful.
I'm a glutton for pain, but that seems like a lot.
Pass pretty easily.
Any other business to come before the MPO? Sylvia?
I will just say,
On Nate?
if I could, just a plug. The final GASIC hearing in the region and in the state is tomorrow evening in Goffstown, 7 p.m. It's at Fire Station number 18 in Goffstown, which is on Church Street. So anybody who may be interested in coming out and having your say on the draft 10-year plan, please do so, because tomorrow's hearing is the last public hearing in the state.
Thank you, Nate. Any other comments? Anything else? Okay, could I have a motion to adjourn, please? Second. Those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thumbs up.
Call to order Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission meeting. Could I have a motion to accept the minutes of September 26th? Second, okay. Any questions or corrections or omissions?
Did you get that, Linda?
Okay, Sylvia, do you want to
Yes,
do the
let's,
roll call and the action on the minutes?
yes, let's do the roll call then. Peter, there we go. All right, starting in Bedford today, we have in-house Bill Jean.
Present, yes.
Thanks, Bill.
What the hell is going on here?
What the heck is going on?
Yeah, boy.
Okay, if everyone can just mute themselves if they're not talking, but let's hear from Dan Heath from Bedford.
Present, yes.
Thank you, Dan. Brian Lord.
Present, yes.
Thank you, Brian. From Chester in-house, we have Andrew Haddock.
Present, yes.
Deb Munson online.
Present and yes.
Thanks, Deb. In-house, we have Fred McGarry.
Present and abstain.
Thanks, Fred. From Derry, in-house, Jeff Moulton,
Here and yes.
John O'Connor,
Present.
and Richard, sorry, John, and Richard Tripp.
Here and yes.
From Francistown in-house, we have Linda Kuhnhart,
Here and yes.
Gary Schneckenberg,
Here and yes.
and online Jennifer Vadney.
Here and abstain.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. Goffstown in-house, we now have Barbara Griffin.
Here. Yes.
Thanks, Barbara. And online Jacob LaFontaine.
Here and yes.
Thanks, Jacob. Hosted in-house, we have Denise Pitchett-Folk.
Present, yes.
Thanks, Denise. From Londonderry in-house, we have Deb Levens
Present abstain.
and Art Rugg.
Present and yes on the minutes.
Thanks, Art. And online, we have Brian Battaglia.
Present and abstain.
Thank you. From Manchester in-house, we have Peter Capano,
Present and abstain.
Ray Clement,
Present and abstain.
Dan O'Neill.
Here and abstain.
Online, we have Marcus Ponce de Leon
Here and yes.
and Donald Waldron.
Here, here and abstain.
Thanks, Don. And then we'll skip down to Wyndham. In-house, we have Peter Griffin and
Here and yes.
I don't know why I keep doing that. And Ed Lapointe. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you, Sylvia. Okay, first item, CEDS project list update. Cam Bowman. Okay. I can do this.
All right, can everybody online see this presentation?
I still see it in PowerPoint.
How about now, Tammy?
It's still in PowerPoint.
Does anyone have any?
Nate, come help.
Yeah.
He did some double click thing on the little
Yeah.
screen.
Put it in full screen first.
Okay.
When you share the full screen. Oh, but then when you back out, of it, you can't do that. For some reason, when it gave you that option to share full screen.
Well, I'm gonna try one more time, but it won't be the end of the world if you see it in all right, Tammy, how's that?
Now I see presenter notes.
That's fine.
Okay.
That's okay because
Yeah, I see what your issue is. Okay, I can help you with
Can
it.
I-
Yeah, you have to duplicate.
okay. Thank you very much,
Does
Nate.
that work?
Yes,
Yes.
that's full screen.
That's good.
Teamwork.
Have a piece of pizza, Nate.
So I'm Cam. I was in front of you all last month with this same exact presentation. And what this is about is the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, otherwise known as the CEDS. And last month I walked us through what we've been doing the past several months, which was working with the Central New Hampshire Regional Planning Commission to update just our project list in the CEDS. And so I can run through my presentation again, or I can open this up for a motion to adopt the updated CEDS project list. So I would welcome a motion. If not, I'm happy to run through the presentation again.
I move, just for discussion purposes, I move to accept the list because I got it from Cam and reviewed it.
Thank you.
Is there a second on that? Okay, discussion.
Have there been any changes since your presentation last month?
No,
Did you get any comments from anybody after? the
no,
meeting?
no public comments other than
Us talking. yeah.
discussion, yeah.
Any comments from those calling in? Okay, could I have a motion then to accept?
We had that.
It's already on.
That was.
Well, we have to take a vote. I'm sorry, could I
Oh.
have a vote, please? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Calling, one abstention, calling in.
Please stop sharing
Could I see what your response is, please?
after all that.
Yeah.
From those calling in, all those in favor?
Thumbs up?
Opposed?
Seeing lots of thumbs up.
Okay.
Were those opposed votes?
Those are, thumbs up is good.
Yes. Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. It's in the affirmative.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you for the
We're
motion.
not done yet, Cam. EPA Brownfields Assessment Group.
right. I just want to say, before we move on to Brownfields, that we will be seeking funding to update full CEDS. So that was just kind of to keep the CEDS project list alive and breathing and not to be outdated. So you will be hearing from us again relatively soon. Okay. Now, I will be presenting, what's that?
Nothing.
On our US EPA Brownfields Assessment Grant. And before I get started, I do want to introduce a project manager from our recently hired qualified environmental professional, Mr. Judd Newcomb from Crederi Associates. So if everybody can give Judd a big warm SNHPC welcome. Hello, Judd.
How's it going?
Welcome, Judd.
Okay, so I'm gonna give a little overview of the Brownfields program, and then I'm gonna pass it along to Judd to talk a little bit about Crederi and some of the work. Okay, what is going on?
You're just.
Cannot see lenses. Okay, Tammy. Can
Looks
you see
good.
all right, let's go.
Wow.
Okay. So what is the brownfields? US EPA defines it as real property, the expansion, redevelopment, or use of which may be complicated by the presence or potential presence of a hazardous substance, pollutant, or contaminant. That picture right there is Elliott at River's Edge in Manchester. I'm sure many are familiar. That was a former brownfield site that utilized SNHPC funding to help kind of move it along. So what are the benefits to owners and developers with brownfields? So this is federal funding for environmental assessments, and it is free to property owners. It identifies and recognizes environmental conditions. It helps to reduce uncertainty of cleanup costs while accessing economic incentives such as loans and grants and tax relief. It helps to reduce liability and risk through phase 1 environmental science assessments. It can help to facilitate property transfers, and it can help leverage funding for environmental cleanup. So a little background. The Southern Hampshire Planning Commission has been awarded more than $1 million in US EPA Brownfields funds since its first assessment grant in 2007. That has resulted in several redevelopment of properties of former brownfield sites in our region. I already mentioned River's Edge, Giorgio's in downtown Manchester, and there's several others throughout the region in Goffstown and other places. So recently, we were awarded $500,000 in assessment grant funding for an anticipated performance period through September 2026. And last month, we entered a contract with Crederi Associates, who will be our qualified environmental professional. US EPA does not want us to say consultant. So when we go and you talk to your communities, it's a QEP, it's environmental professional, it's not a consultant. So I want to throw that out there.
That's specific to the Brownfields program?
That's so weird.
So our grant award placed a focus on, the EPA grant award placed focus on applications which addressed equity and environmental justice. This just so happens that Zach had recently published the equity analysis when we were working on this grant application. So our winning application placed that emphasis on addressing needs within low income and minority census tracts within our region. And so as a result, we were kind of looking at properties in Manchester and Derry. So those were kind of identified as high priority areas. That said, this is a region-wide assessment grant. And so all potential brownfield properties in our region are eligible to use this funding. So the process. So we have established a Brownfields Advisory Committee who will provide local knowledge and guidance throughout this whole process. They will help allocate the awarded grant funds with support from SNHPC staff and the QEP when applicable. And so the BAC consists of representatives from municipalities, DES, US EPA, and REDC. And if anyone wants to be involved in the BAC, please let me know. We have a doodle poll out right now for a meeting in mid-November. So if you're interested, let me know. And we'd love to have commissioners on board as well. So we will be working with Crederi, the BAC, and property owners to conduct outreach to the public, inventory brownfield sites, conduct phase 1 and phase 2 environmental assessments, develop cleanup action plans, and create comprehensive redevelopment plans for a few select sites that we hope will be vetted by the public, and then hopefully assist in obtaining additional funding for cleanup. And I want to give a little background on kind of how we selected Crederi. So we put out an RFP that was posted in the Union Leader and on our site. We got responses from Beta Group, Fossin O'Neill, Crederi, Sanborn Head Associates, and Verdantis, and all of which were really wonderful responses to the RFP. And so we had a evaluation committee consisting of Beverly Donovan, Derry Economic Development, Jody Nazaka, Manchester Economic Development, Suzanne Nienaber, and then myself. And so we reviewed each RFP and we held interviews a couple months ago. And there was a whole proposal review process that's kind of been used by SNHPC over the years and kind of updated. So I don't want to go through everything, but I do want to say that the committee found that Crederi scored the highest for each evaluation criteria, more than qualified to do the work, and the proposal was responsive to the scope and the work detailed in the RFP. Also, too, I want to know, I think we were impressed by Crederi because not only do they have the environmental engineering and the science down, but they really saw the big picture of kind of, how do we utilize these federal funds to get these once polluted properties, and to bring them to redevelopment and to talk to the right people and make the right things happen. So with that, I want to welcome Judd again and Crederi, who I do want to say SNHPC has worked with Crederi in the past. So this is really a welcome back, Crederi. And Judd, I'm going to let you take over.
All right, thanks. Yeah, so as you can see on the screen, Crederi was founded in 2007, and really our focus was on brownfields, and we have a mission for positively impacting the communities in which we live and work, and we do that through the Brownfields program. And Crederi, has a great acronym there for community revitalization, economic development, environmental remediation, and engineering. And I'm the project manager for almost all of Crederi's Brownfields programs. I've worked on over 75 grants, including grants for Southern New Hampshire in 2007 and 2009. So really, as we're getting going here with the Brownfields Committee, our first process is to come up with a Brownfields inventory of sites. So if anybody out there has a potential site in your community, please talk to Cam or reach out to me. It could be anything from, an abandoned commercial building, a mill building, former schools are great, or it can even be a residential property. And we can do everything from, as Cam mentioned, a phase 1 environmental site assessment, a phase 2 hazardous building materials surveys, anything basically from residential lead paint inspections to tearing down a mill. Anything you could think of that's, abandoned, vacant, and has any roadblocks that might be environmental. In order for a developer to take it or a town to take it or divest even. So really the process is I'm starting to do an inventory now, and I'm doing windshield surveys and driving around the communities. Cam and I have started to meet with folks, and I'm sure I'll be meeting with some other of you in the room. And we're going to come up with a potential list of brownfields that we identify. And then through the nominations that we receive from anybody in the communities, we'll work to prioritize those lists with the BAC committee. And just excuse me. And we'll figure out where we want to target our funds. As Cam mentioned, we do need to at least take a focus into Manchester and Derry, as that was the target areas of the grant, but we can spend money anywhere within the region. So, I think this is an example from your most recent grant that you just had.
This was, and some of you may remember this. This is just an example of like kind of what we're looking for. So on the left is what it used to be. Aero Glass was, it's 179 South Willow Street, and you drive by properties like this all the time that used to be some sort of industrial use that maybe looks like nothing's there anymore. It's a perfect potential site for us where we can go and approach the property owner, or maybe the town may know who that is. So ultimately they use our Brownfields funds and turn into what's now a State Farm office. And go ahead, Judd.
No, I was gonna say, I think the takeaway is that a lot of the perception out there is, oh, I'm a small town, I don't have any brownfields. And we've done brownfields in some of the most rural communities you can imagine. It doesn't matter if it's, somebody with a tire dump on their back 40, or, we did a small garage in Candia. We've done a couple sites in Goffstown and certainly in Manchester, and can really, as long as there's some indication or perception of some environmental concern that's inhibiting a redevelopment, we can spend funds on the site and try to move it along. This one was the former Granite Landing site right off the highway that we ended up pulling out a bunch of tanks. It was a former Esso and then Exxon gas station at one time, and now that's the Giorgio's restaurant. We also assisted on the River's Edge stuff with the Elliott Hospital, and now the New Hampshire liquor store. I think there are a few other ones that I hadn't mentioned. But really, after a site gets nominated, I'll submit an eligibility document to EPA. I've never had one get rejected, so once that just takes a few days to get through. And then we start on the commercial environmental due diligence process in general, which begins with a phase 1 environmental site assessment. And that's really where we take a walk over the site, do interior inspection, look for potential, tanks or floor drains or dumping or whatever else that may be. And then we review all the documents at the municipal level, the EPA level, and the New Hampshire DES. And we summarize that into a report that identifies what we call recognized environmental conditions, which are generally something that may indicate a release of petroleum or hazardous materials to the environment. And we also come up with a list of other environmental findings, maybe asbestos is present or PCBs in a transformer or other things that might present environmental business risks to a developer or an owner. And once that's done, assuming we find something and the committee wants to move forward, we go to the phase 2 process, which is the actual boots on the ground, collecting environmental media samples, doing an asbestos inspection, and really just trying to get a handle on what's at a site so we can get cost estimates and do an engineering evaluation on what it's going to take to actually clean that up and how much money it's going to take. And as part of that process, some of the other hurdles we come across, or sites might need a geophysical survey or a geotechnical evaluation so we can design foundations. And without getting into the remediation aspect of things, because this funding doesn't allow for it, but part of the Brownfields cleanup process, when you get that funding, we can use like a building to cover contamination to lower the cleanup costs. So we can do those additional investigations at this level to facilitate that moving forward to save cost in the long run. Then we can also do other things to help properties along, like historic preservation assessments, whether it's archaeological or architectural, so they can go to the State Historic Preservation Office for review, site surveys. Really, we can fit anything that's needed for a site into the program as long as we can associate it with the environmental assessment work or cleanup planning work. And once we get a phase 2 under wraps, then we move to the remediation planning aspect. They call it an analysis of brownfields cleanup alternatives, which basically says if we do nothing, it's not going to be protective of the public health. It's not going to be protective of the environment. But if we do the full cleanup and get rid of everything and put it back to a clean site, it's going to be fully protective of that, but it's going to cost exponentially more than if we do something in the middle that's protective of both human health and the environment, but we can manage it with deed restrictions or covering with a parking lot or a building or other environmental management things. So that's really what that ABCA stands out as. And then the remedial action plan is the component, is that once we select how we're going to clean it up, it explains exactly how we're going to clean it up, what we're going to do, how we're going to sample, how we're going to dispose of things. And that gets buy-in from the New Hampshire DES. And if we use New Hampshire DES cleanup money or Brownfields money for cleanup, we enter what they call the New Hampshire's Brownfields Covenant Not to Sue program. And that is the legal document that says if we follow the remedial action plan, the New Hampshire DES is going to write us a certificate of completion, or the owner, I should say, that says they're never going to come back to that owner and make them do anything else above and beyond what they agreed to. And then once we have that in place, depending on if it's an owner or, a private owner or a municipal owner or nonprofit, there's other brownfields cleanup money available. Specifically for a municipality or a nonprofit, they can apply for direct brownfields cleanup grants to EPA. And with the bipartisan infrastructure bill, those are up to $5 million now. So we can tackle some very large sites. For private owners, they're only eligible for loans through either the New Hampshire DES or another brownfields revolving loan fund. Unfortunately, New Hampshire the only one in New Hampshire right now is Capital Region, and they have very limited funding. So, and they have not reapplied for more funding. So we're trying to get some more funding into the state, but that's kind of limited. And Cam, I don't know, you had this other line in here about other funding is available. I didn't know if you had another program in mind for that.
No, I think just, us working with, whether it's property owners or, to seek future cleanup funding or helping to identify different mechanisms for folks.
Yes, yep. So the New Hampshire DES, every other year, they put out $500,000 for multiple grant awards of up to 200,000, specifically for municipalities. So if there's a municipal property that we find has contaminated or issues and it's eligible, we could apply for that. Otherwise, we go directly to EPA. Either way, we can help work with developers and owners in order to figure out collaboratively with the EPA and the DES how to fund it. And if they have tax credits involved, what other information do they need as far as environmental assessment and documents?
Great. So as Judd mentioned, we are currently updating the brownfields inventory in our region. We have recently met with municipal representatives in Derry and in Manchester looking at potential sites. And so I want to say that all of this work really relies heavily on local knowledge. That includes commissioners, that includes municipal staff, people who have just been in the community a long time to know the history of sites that we may not know. So residents, local organizations, businesses. So this is really kind of a call for help that if you know of any sites, please reach out to us. We want this to be a successful program, and the only way that can happen is we kind of tap in to you guys and the local knowledge of our communities. So for more information, stay tuned. Check out our website on our Brownfields page. We have a site nomination form up there, an FAQ. But yeah, please reach out to me if you have any questions, and I'm sure you will be seeing Judd as we keep moving along. So thank you, and thank you, Judd, for coming.
Questions for Cam or Judd in-house? Questions for Cam or Judd, those calling in? I have a couple of questions. First of all, is this presentation going to go out to the local planning offices?
It could. I think we'll probably be sending out other material too to them, like the site nomination forms and some messaging.
How far back do you go on an industrial site? Like, for instance, I would venture to say every community here has an industrial past. Like some of the mills haven't existed for 150 years. What is the time frame that you're looking at?
Judd, I'll leave you to answer that for possibly a phase 1 ESA question.
Sure. We go back basically as far as the records allow us to. So it doesn't matter. We've had sites that are back to the early 1800s and sites that are more recent and, more modern facilities. The biggest thing is that in order to be eligible for the Brownfields program, there just needs to be some inkling in your mind that there is an environmental contamination issue there, or could be, and that there is some redevelopment or reuse of that property in mind. If it's just going to be an industrial site and sit there vacant and it's on the outskirts of town and nobody has any interest in developing it, that's not necessarily a good brownfield site for us. We're looking for something that someone's actively pursuing to either clean up and turn into a park or turn into affordable housing or anything. Just some sort of redevelopment needs to be involved.
Thank you. Any other questions for either gentleman?
So if you have a site that needs to be cleaned up, and you always wished you had parking for your hiking trails in that area, we're turning it from a site that needs to be cleaned up into a parking lot, such redevelopment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You've got a spot for you.
Okay.
Who is I'm sorry, I don't know who that is.
I'm sorry, I don't know what. Linda, do you want to introduce yourself? I can figure out how to.
Is it still the fourth Tuesday?
Here, Linda Kudak for Fraserstown. Yeah, so we have an old ski shop from back in the day that every year we threaten to tear it down and clean it up, but of course we figure we can't afford to clean it up, so it just sits there being a source of contamination. And it is right. So the town owns it. We love the pond, but we never bring ourselves to get it gone. And we talk about having a parking lot there so that people can access it's on the old side of the ski mountain, the hiking trails on that side of the ski system. It does happen to be rather adjacent to, I don't know how close to a community well for the condominiums on the hillside. So I think it would make a great spot to disappear. I'll have I'll send you the info as soon as your fill out sheet shows up and move off.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll send it to you after this.
We're a small town. That's why it's doing nothing.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a great site. Actually, I'm doing 2 similar ones in Milford with the Nashville Regional Planning Commission, so.
Thank you all very much. Any other business?
Just as a reminder, as the November, December meetings are right around the corner, the November meeting is still the 4th Tuesday of the month, but in December, it is the 3rd Tuesday of the month. Otherwise, we'd be here right after Christmas. So we will see you, is it the 18th, Linda? 19th, but it's that 3rd Tuesday. So this is just your first reminder. In November, you'll get another reminder. And happy Halloween to everybody.
Any public comments?
The 28th, something, are we gonna be on the 28th?
November 28th will be the TIP Amendment 3 public hearing. That is the week after Thanksgiving. So
Yeah.
So the 19th is December. Okay, missed that one.
December meeting, yes, it's okay, but it's in the report.
Any public comments? Any commissioner insights? Those calling in are in the room? Okay, could I have a motion to adjourn then, please? Second. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you all for turning
Thank
out.
you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.